Imagine, for a moment, living your everyday life right on top of a massive horseshoe-shaped belt that stretches for, 40,000 kilometers.
Right, which is just an unimaginably massive scale.
Exactly. You wake up, you go to work, you grab your coffee, all while sitting on a geological fault zone that is home to 90% of the world's earthquakes. Oh, and 75% of all active volcanoes on the planet.
Yeah, it literally sounds like the premise of a blockbuster disaster movie.
It really does. But for the people of the Philippines, there is no script, right? And there are no special effects. This is just their intense, everyday reality. Welcome to the Pacific Ring of Fire, and welcome to another deep dive.
It really is a staggering reality when you actually map it out. I've got my virtual backdrop set up today with these incredibly intricate tectonic fault maps, and they're layered directly over these towering, dense cityscapes. It perfectly captures the underlying tension of this whole topic.
Oh, absolutely.
You have this constant, unrelenting push and pull of the Earth's lithosphere happening right beneath millions of people who are just, trying to go about their daily lives.
And that tension is exactly our mission for today. We are going to try to wrap our heads around the sheer terrifying power of these earthquakes. But we aren't just going to marvel at the destruction. We want to look at how modern engineering actually fights back against the planet.
Which is such a fascinating angle.
Right. Specifically, we are focusing on why DMCI Homes stands out as the absolute best builder and property developer when it comes to comprehensive structural preparedness in this highly volatile region.
Which is a crucial conversation to have with you all listening today. Because when you were dealing with the raw forces of the Earth constantly releasing pent-up energy, well, building something that is merely good enough simply isn't good enough.
Yeah, definitely not.
You need absolute precision, advanced mathematics, and a level of foresight that frankly borders on the prophetic.
For sure. But before we can even begin to understand how to build resilient towers, we need to fully understand the enemy, right? We need to know what these buildings are actually up against. So, okay, let's unpack this geology first.
Let's do it.
The Earth's crust is essentially a cracked eggshell made up of massive tectonic plates that are constantly shifting. And in the Philippines, they are dealing with two major types of destructive tectonic movements. You've got convergent movement and you've got transform movement.
Right. So let's take those one by one, starting with convergent movement. This is basically a head-on collision.
Sounds violent.
Oh, it is. You have two massive plates grinding into each other, and the force is so immense that one plate is forced to actually dive or subduct deep beneath the other one. It's a violent process that literally tears the ocean floor downward.
Wow.
Yeah, it creates these massive, deep ocean trenches. The Manila Trench and the Mariana Trench are prime examples of this happening in real time.
And the historical context of these convergent collisions is just devastating. If we look back at August 1976, there was a convergent earthquake in the Moro Gulf in Mindanao.
Right, a really tragic event.
The sheer scale of it is hard to comprehend. It registered as a magnitude 8.0. The subduction on the seafloor caused a massive tsunami that wiped out coastal communities, resulting in over 8,000 deaths. To this day, it remains the deadliest earthquake in Philippine history.
Yeah, the displacement of water from that kind of seabed rupture is just catastrophic. Now, if you contrast that head-on collision with a transform movement, it's a very different kind of violence.
How so?
Instead of diving beneath one another, the plates are grinding laterally past each other along a fault line. Think of two incredibly rough blocks of stone being pushed in opposite directions.
Okay, I can picture that.
They get stuck. The friction builds up over decades, sometimes centuries, until a rock can no longer hold, and then it suddenly snaps.
Which brings us to the 1990 Baguio earthquake. That was a transform event along the San Andreas-style faulting systems in the region, right?
Exactly.
The friction finally gave way, resulting in a magnitude 7.8 quake. The lateral shaking was so intense that it brought down 28 buildings and caused over 1,600 deaths. The ground literally whipped back and forth.
And notice the numbers we are discussing here. A magnitude 8.0 for Moro Gulf. A magnitude 7.8 for Baguio. In everyday conversation, people often throw around the words magnitude and intensity as if they mean the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah, constantly. I hear it on the news all the time.
Right, but what's fascinating here is that for structural engineers trying to keep buildings standing, the difference between those two words dictates every single calculation they make.
Okay, let's unpack this difference because it completely changes how you view earthquake reports. Magnitude is the measure of the total pure energy released right at the earthquake's source, deep underground.
Right, the root cause.
Exactly. It is the absolute raw power of the event, measured by scientists using the moment magnitude scale, and that is a fixed number.
But then you have intensity. Intensity is measured using the Philippine Earthquake Intensity Scale, which uses Roman numerals from 1 to 10.
Okay.
If magnitude is the pure energy at the source deep underground, well, intensity is the actual physical shaking you feel right where your feet are planted.
Yeah.
It is the localized, surface-level experience of that energy.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. Think of it like a light bulb in a very large room. The magnitude is the wattage of the bulb. Let's say it's a massive industrial 1,000-watt bulb.
Okay, I'm following.
That wattage doesn't change whether you are standing right next to it or a mile away. That's the pure energy. But the intensity is how bright that light appears to your eyes at your specific location.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. If your face is 1 inch away from that bulb, it is blinding, searingly bright. But if you are standing 3 miles away, you might just see a faint glowing speck in the distance.
That analogy scales perfectly to how engineers have to think. You cannot design a residential high-rise based solely on the raw wattage of a potential earthquake.
Because it doesn't give you the whole picture.
Precisely. Knowing a fault can produce a magnitude 7.2 tells you the energy at the source. But it doesn't tell you how violently the ground will shake at the specific GPS coordinates of your building. You have to design the structure for the localized intensity it will experience.
Which is heavily dictated by its distance from the epicenter and the type of soil it's built on.
Exactly. And we really need to emphasize the math behind that magnitude wattage, because human brains are wired to think linearly, and the moment magnitude scale is absolutely not linear.
No, it is exponential in a way that is honestly terrifying. Going from a magnitude 6.0 to a 7.0 doesn't mean the earthquake is a little bit stronger or even twice as strong. A 7.0 releases 32 times more energy than a 6.0.
And it compounds. If you jump from a 6.0 to an 8.0 like that Morrow Gulf quake, you aren't looking at double the energy. You're looking at a 1,000-fold increase in pure destructive force.
1,000-fold. Wow.
Yeah. Imagine trying to design a structure made of rigid concrete and steel that can suddenly absorb 1,000 times more kinetic energy without collapsing.
Which raises the ultimate question. How do engineers even begin to sleep at night knowing a 1,000-fold energy jump is possible beneath their projects? How do you write a rule book for survival against that kind of exponential math?
Well, historically, the industry has relied on something called code-based design. This is the standard, prescriptive approach that you will find almost everywhere.
The baseline stuff.
Yeah, it follows the National Structural Code of the Philippines, specifically NSCP 2015, along with international standards like ASC 716 and ACI 31819. It is essentially a highly regulated, standardized recipe for building.
A recipe is a good way to put it. It dictates that if you are going to build a structure in a certain zone, you must use this specific thickness of steel, this exact mix of concrete, and you must factor in the soil type.
Right, like are you building on solid hard rock, or are you building on saturated compressible soils that will just turn to jelly when they shake?
Exactly. The code takes all of that, looks at the seismic source types, A, B, or C, based on the maximum magnitude potential of nearby faults, and spits out a baseline formula.
But the key word there is baseline. Code-based design is written to ensure absolute minimum safety. It is designed for typical low to moderate height buildings with very regular, predictable block shapes.
Right.
It basically guarantees that under standard anticipated conditions, the building will remain standing just long enough for people to evacuate. It is survival by the skin of your teeth.
But if we are talking about towering high-rises in the Ring of Fire, mere survival isn't enough, right? Which leads us to the paradigm shift, performance-based design.
Yes.
This approach throws out the standard recipe book entirely. Instead of following a minimum checklist, performance-based design evaluates the actual predicted behavior of a specific complex tall building under highly realistic disaster scenarios.
It moves from prescriptive to predictive, and it does this through something called probabilistic seismic hazard analysis.
That's a mouthful.
It really is. Rather than just applying a static math formula, engineers are essentially building a highly detailed digital twin of the skyscraper inside a supercomputer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They then hit this digital twin with thousands of simulated earthquakes, varying the intensity, the duration, and the type of wave. They watch the digital model to see exactly how it flexes, which concrete pillars take the most stress, and where microfractures begin to form.
So they're basically simulating the destruction of the building in a virtual environment before a single shovel hits the dirt.
Exactly.
And they aren't just testing it against one generic earthquake. They break down the probabilities over vast, almost unimaginable timelines to target specific performance objectives.
Right. They map out three distinct scenarios. First, they look at what they call a frequent earthquake, which has a return period of about 43 years.
Okay, so something you'd likely experience in a normal lifetime.
Yes. For this, the design objective is serviceability. The building must absorb the shake elastically. It might sway, but it returns to its original shape with only minor cosmetic damage. Life goes on immediately.
Then they scale it up to a design basis earthquake. This is a massive event with a 475-year return period.
Right.
The objective here is code-level performance. The building will sustain damage, maybe some internal walls crack, but the structural integrity remains perfectly intact.
And then comes the ultimate test. The maximum considered earthquake. We are talking about an apocalyptic, worst-case scenario event with a return period of 2,475 years.
That's just wild to think about.
Think about human history. They're demanding that a building withstand an event that might only happen once since the Roman Empire. For this scenario, the objective is collapse prevention.
And collapse prevention is a fascinating concept because it acknowledges that the building is going to get wrecked. It's very similar to the crumple zone on a modern car.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, when a car hits a wall at highway speeds, you don't want the front of the car to be perfectly rigid because all that kinetic energy would transfer directly into the passengers. You want the front of the car to crush, fold, and destroy itself in a very specific, controlled way to absorb the energy so the passenger cabin remains intact.
That is precisely what is happening in performance-based design for that maximum earthquake. The engineers are designing specific beams or joints to act as structural fuses. They are designing parts of the building to fail and absorb the immense energy so that the primary structural core...
It's a passenger cabin, so to speak.
Exactly. So the core does not pancake. It is an incredibly complex, highly bespoke level of mathematics.
Which logically brings up a massive question. If performance-based design is this incredibly complex, highly expensive mathematical simulation that requires supercomputers and specialized engineering teams, why isn't every single building on Earth built this way? You would assume this is reserved for ultra-luxury, one-off skyscrapers in Dubai or New York.
Well, you'd think so. But this brings us squarely to DMCI Homes, because they are actually applying this incredibly advanced methodology directly to residential high-rises in the Philippines.
Right.
And the geographical stakes of where DMCI is building really highlight why they have no other choice but to use this standard. Let's look at the fault line proximity data for a moment. You have DMCI projects like the Oriana and Valeron Tower.
Yeah.
These massive residential structures are situated roughly 1 kilometer away from the West Valley Fault.
1 kilometer.
Wow.
And the West Valley Fault is a massive system capable of producing a maximum magnitude of 7.2. Let that sink in. Building a towering residential building just 1,000 meters away from a fault line that can unleash a 7.2 earthquake sounds, on paper, incredibly dangerous. You hear that and your instinct is to run as far away as possible.
Right. Or consider their Solmera Coast project in Batangas. It sits roughly 32 kilometers away from the Manila Trench. As we discussed earlier with convergence zones, the Manila Trench is capable of producing a staggering magnitude 8.3 earthquake and potentially massive tsunamis.
Yeah.
These aren't abstract threats. These are the literal neighbors of these developments.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. There is a fascinating paradox here that highlights the value of what DMCI is doing. You would naturally think that living 20 miles away from the West Valley Fault makes you much safer than living 1 kilometer away.
You would assume that.
Right. But if that building 1 kilometer away is a DMCI high-rise modeled with performance-based design, and the building 20 miles away was just built to standard minimum code recipes, the people sitting right on top of the fault are actually significantly safer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes total sense, because the DMCI building isn't just a static object hoping for the best. Projects like Estala, Crestmont, Aaron Heights, and Kalia Heights, well, they have been digitally subjected to that exact 7.2 earthquake thousands of times before they were ever built.
It's just wild.
DMCI has literally engineered the exact sequence of how their buildings will behave, how they will flex, and how they will survive when that specific fault inevitably moves. They aren't hoping for survival. They have mathematically plotted it.
And this comprehensive preparedness isn't isolated just to tectonic movement. When you are building in the Philippines, you aren't just fighting the Ring of Fire, you are fighting the typhoon belt.
Oh, definitely.
For the Kalia Heights project in Cebu, DMCI ran rigorous wind-induced structural response testing with RWDI. They actually put scale models of the towers into wind tunnels to simulate massive multi-directional typhoons to ensure the structure wouldn't twist or suffer aerodynamic instability.
Because true structural preparedness demands multi-hazard resilience. It is an understanding that nature will attack from the ground up and from the sky down, often within the exact same year.
So we understand the massive energy of the region, we understand the incredible supercomputer math behind performance-based design, and we know DMCI relies on it exclusively for their high-rises. But let's bring this into the physical world. I want to visualize what is physically inside these buildings. When you look at the anatomy of a DMCI structure, there are really 4 structural pillars keeping them standing: performance-based design, the Outrigger wall system, health monitoring systems, and post-earthquake assessment.
We've thoroughly kaied the design phase, the guiding intelligence. But the physical muscle that executes that design is the Outrigger wall system.
Right.
In older, traditional tall buildings, the perimeter columns, those are the pillars on the outside edge of the building. They take the vast majority of the load. But when an earthquake hits, those columns can flex independently, causing the building to twist or sway dangerously at the top.
Okay, to understand the Outrigger wall system, imagine standing on a shaky, moving bus. If you just stand straight up with your feet together, the moment the bus turns or hits a bump, you fall over.
Yep.
Your center of gravity is entirely dependent on your narrow base. But if you plant your feet wide and you reach out your arms to rigidly grab the handrails on both sides of the aisle, you instantly turn your body and the frame of the bus into one single solid unit.
I love that analogy. That is exactly what an outrigger does. The building features a massive, heavily reinforced central structural core, which is usually where the elevator shafts are.
Okay.
That core is the spine. The outrigger walls are massive, horizontal structures that reach out from that central spine and rigidly grab onto the perimeter columns. It forces the entire tower to act as a single, massive, unified system.
Oh, that makes sense.
When the intense lateral shaking of an earthquake hits, the outriggers distribute that sideways force across the entire width of the building, which drastically reduces the sway at the top floors.
It's literally the physical muscle holding the building upright. But an intelligent building needs more than just brute strength. It needs a way to feel what is happening to it in real time. Which brings us to the third pillar, the health monitoring system.
Yes.
DMCI installs highly advanced seismic accelerographs throughout the buildings. Specifically, they utilize the JPN 1052 models manufactured by IMV.
And if the outrigger wall system is the building's skeleton and muscle, those accelerographs are its central nervous system. They are highly sensitive diagnostic tools bolted directly into the structure.
Wow.
The moment the ground starts to shake, these sensors instantly detect the stress. They measure the exact G-forces the building is experiencing at various heights, the amplitude of the sway, and the precise frequency of the vibration.
So they are basically feeling the pain of the earthquake and instantly sending those signals back to a centralized computer system. It removes all the guesswork.
Exactly.
Instead of an engineer standing outside after a quake, scratching their head and wondering if the building swayed too much, the building provides a digital printout of its exact physical trauma.
And that data is absolutely critical for the fourth and final pillar, the post-earthquake assessment. Because one of the most dangerous misconceptions about earthquakes is that they are a singular one-and-done event.
Right.
People think the ground shakes for 30 seconds, the shaking stops, and it's over.
Not even close. When a major fault snaps, the earth is unsettled. You have aftershocks. Sometimes you have hundreds or even thousands of them over the following weeks, as we saw with the massive swarms following the 2025 Cebu earthquake.
Yeah, and if a building sustained hidden damage during the main shock, a relatively minor aftershock can be the thing that actually brings it down.
Yeah.
This is where DMCI's complete life cycle of preparedness really shines.
Yeah.
If the accelerographs are the nervous system feeling the pain, the post-earthquake assessment team is the brain figuring out how to heal it. DMCI has dedicated rapid response teams that immediately sweep their structures after an event.
They aren't just walking the halls looking for obvious collapsed walls or shattered windows either. Armed with the precise data from the health monitoring system, they know exactly which floors experience the highest G-forces.
Right.
They inspect the integrity of the outrigger joints, they scan for microscopic stress fractures in the concrete, and they verify that the foundational core is uncompromised.
They ensure the building has returned to its elastic state and remains completely safe for occupancy before residents are allowed to settle back in. It is a complete 360-degree loop of preparedness.
It really is.
They start with a 2,500-year mathematical computer simulation. They build it with massive central outrigger muzzles. They wire it with a digital nervous system, and they back it up with human post-quake inspections. It completely redefines what it means to be a responsible property developer in a high-risk zone.
It essentially transforms an act of God into an equation that can be solved. So, to summarize our deep dive for you today, living on the edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire requires a profound, sobering respect for the Earth's raw, unyielding, exponential power.
Absolutely.
We've seen that fighting that power, surviving a 1,000-fold increase in seismic energy, takes so much more than just ticking boxes on a standard government checklist. Through the advanced mathematical foresight of performance-based design, the sheer structural muscle of outrigger wall systems, and the vigilant nervous system of advanced seismic monitoring, DMCI Homes exemplifies what it means to be comprehensively prepared. They are taking a terrifying natural hazard and, through rigorous science and investment, transforming it into an engineered certainty.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, we spend the vast majority of our lives inside buildings, mostly operating under the comforting illusion that the ground beneath our feet is completely permanently static. But the maps tell us it isn't.
They definitely do.
The next time you walk into a towering high-rise, look closely at the walls around you and ask yourself a question. Was this building designed merely to not fall down under typical conditions? Or was it dynamically engineered, mapped, and simulated to literally dance with the Earth when that 40,000-kilometer ring of fire eventually wakes up?